Welcome to the tutorial on how to create these gorgeous ballet slippers using the Pixie&Me Ballet Slipper DIY kit. Now the first thing we need to do is to get all of our tools ready for this project. So inside your Pixie&Me kit, you'll find that you have your sharp stitching needle, you also have your fabric marker, and of course your stick and stitch ballet slippers. Now we do provide two sizes. I've got a size 2 to 3 sweater here, so I'm going to be using the small slippers for this project. So the first thing we need to do is to cut around our design. Now I would suggest getting as close as you can to your design so that you have less stick and stitch to remove later down the track, as it can be quite tricky to remove. And I would also recommend keeping these little scrap pieces of paper, as you can draw on them and stitch on them again in future projects. So now that we have our design ready, we need to make sure that it's nice and central to the garment. Now you can use a ruler here. I personally like to count the stitches either side of my stencil or my stick and stitch. And then when I'm happy that I've got equal sides, I can use my fabric marker and put a little marking there so that when I remove it from the backing, I know where to place it on my garment. And make sure that you place your stick and stitch stencil onto your garment nice and firmly. So inside your kit you have the darker pink, the baby pink, and also the white. So for the actual shoe we're going to be using the darker pink, and then we're going to use the baby pink for the outer line of the shoe. But first let's go in and do the outline and inside the shoe, and then at the end we'll finish with the ribbon and the ribbons going across the feet. So we're going to just thread onto our needle approximately 2 meters of the darker pink. Just leave a little tail on the end here. There's no need for any fancy knots. Now find your starting point, which we're going to start here, but we're actually going to bring our needle about 1/2 centimeter away from our starting point. And this is because we're going to be using the reverse chain stitch for this project. So starting about 1/2 centimeter away from your starting point, we're going to leave a small tail underneath. We're then going to take our needle back down through the hole that we just came up from to create a loop. Next, we're going to bring our needle to our actual starting point. So once we've brought our needle up to that starting point, we can bring our loop over our needle and pull it through. And you'll see here now that we've got our first chain exactly where we want it to be, which is right at the start of our project. I've just got to straighten this one out a little bit. So we're just going to anchor that down with a stitch, and you'll see here we've got our very first chain. From here we're going to bring our needle down approximately 1/2 centimeter again, and once we bring our needle up, we can turn the needle and use the reverse side of it. Rather than coming through with a sharp needle, it's easier to use the blunt side. So we're just going to push our needle through, and then we're going to bring it back down into the hole that we started. And you'll see now we've got 2 chains, and this is simply how we do a reverse chain stitch. So we're going to bring it up again 1/2 centimeter away, pull it through, and then anchor it down. Now I like to do this type of chain stitch when using my stick and stitch, as I find it a little bit more user-friendly on your fingers. It can be quite tough to pierce through the stick and stitch, so this method is a lot more user-friendly. And this is pretty much it. This is our reverse chain stitch, and we're going to continue with this stitch all the way until we come to the end of to the top end of our slippers. So once we're now at the top, we're just going to anchor that down with a stitch. Now there's no need for tying off here. We're just going to take our needle off our thread, and we're going to thread on about 1 meter more of the pink yarn, and we're going to do the same method going all the way up. So again, we're going to do our starting chain. So we're going to start 1/2 centimeter away from where we want our first chain to sit, and we're going to make that loop. We're going to bring our needle to the next starting point that we want, which is to bring these 2 ends together, and we pull our needle through to create a loop, anchor that down with a stitch, and now you've got your next starting chain. So we can of course now go ahead and do our chain stitch all the way up the inside of the shoe. So again, remembering 1/2 centimeter away from the last chain, reverse side of the needle, and then anchor it down. And we're going to continue like this all the way up until we meet the top end of the shoe where we ended last time. So now that we're here, we're just going to anchor that last stitch down. And then when we turn our garment over, you'll see now we've got 2 tails, and we can just simply tie these 2 together in a triple knot. So we've got 2 from the bottom end and 2 from the top end. So we put them into a triple knot, snip away any excess ends, and we're good to continue. Next, we're going to just fill in the shoes. Now, for this one, I'm actually going to go, I do point from top to bottom here, but I'm actually going to go from bottom to top. I'm going to take it to the top. We're going to anchor down that last stitch. Now, I do have enough yarn on my needle to fill in this section here on the right. So I'm going to do another starting chain next to the last row that I just completed. And then I'm just going to fill in with a chain stitch, and I'm going to do that for this whole section here. And when we turn our garment over, we've got a couple of threads here. We're just going to take our needle off this yarn, and we're going to come back to those threads in a moment. And the next section, we're just going to continue with this method to fill in the inside of the shoe. Now, when we turn our garment over, yes, it's looking a bit of a hot mess. There are multiple ways that you can clean this up. If you're looking for a very quick way to do it, you can just find every set of 2 threads and triple knot them together and just snip away any excess ends. Or you can thread on every single piece of yarn and whip back stitch it through your work and then just snip away the ends. It's entirely up to you. For me, I'm going to be putting a backing over this, so I'm not overly concerned about looking a little bit messy, but if you are not going to be putting a backing on, I would suggest threading the yarn onto your needle and doing a whip back stitch through your work and then snipping away the ends. So what's left to do in the shoe now? We've got the ribbon across the feet and also the outer edge of the ballet shoe, and we're going to be doing this in a baby pink. Now this is exactly the same method that we have just done, so you're going to be doing your starting chain at the top, and then you're going to be doing your reverse chain stitch all the way around the outer edge of the ballet shoe. Now I'm just going to stop here because I've actually almost run out of yarn, so I'm just going to show you what we do in this case. So I'm going to anchor down that stitch and take the yarn off my needle. I'm then going to thread on however much yarn you need to finish the part that you're actually stitching. So for me, I only need a little bit. I'm going to thread that back onto my needle. And then I'm going to start again by going 1/2 centimeter away from the last chain I just created. Bring that one up and flip your garment over. You'll see we've got 2 tails here. We're just going to triple knot those together. And then we can snip away any excess ends. And then when we flip our garment over, we can just continue with our reverse chain stitch as if nothing had ever happened. And you'll see that it is completely seamless and you'll never know that you've changed your yarn or replaced your yarn or added more yarn. So it's a beautiful way to keep stitching and making your project look nice and neat. So we're going to finish this all the way to the top. We can anchor that down with a stitch. And then of course we'll just be doing our usual tie off. You can either do a whip back stitch underneath or you can add a knot and snip away the ends. It's entirely up to you. For me, I'm going to just add a knot and do a little bit of a whip back stitch and snip away, because again, I'm going to be putting a backing on this, so I'm not overly concerned if there are a few little loose ends. And we're just going to repeat that for the other thread as well. Now let's look at the ribbon or the laces of the ballet shoe. So I like to use the darker pink for this, and we use the satin stitch. And the satin stitch looks very, very easy, but it actually can be quite tricky because it's a stitch that needs to look nice and even and straight. So to do this, I like to make my satin stitch nicely spaced out and work in sections rather than the whole thing at once. So you'll see here I'm going to be putting in about 5 or 6 satin stitches here, and then we're going to go back and fill in all the gaps on the way back. So I'm now going to start working my way back to the left again and filling in all the gaps on my way. So we're just going to start with this one here. And then once I've filled that in, I can move to the next section, and you're probably going to be putting about 2 stitches into each little section. And now that's looking all super beautiful. We're going to tie these off. Now you've got 2 little ends here. We're just going to thread our needle all the way back through all of that work, pull it all the way through, and then you're just going to tie off these 2 together in a triple knot. And now we're going to repeat that exact same process with the top section and then again for the bottom section. So this is in 2 parts, so you'll probably put 2 or 3 in here, and then you'll just continue with your satin stitch to finish this one too. And it should look like this. Absolutely gorgeous. So now let's look at the ribbon. Now for the ribbon part that drops down, we're going to be using a back stitch, but for this tiny little bow part here, I'm actually going to use a chain stitch. So let's do our starting chain again. And then we can follow around this ribbon part with a chain stitch all the way around. Now I must apologize here, I am filming outside today and the sunshine is really starting to come while I'm doing this section here, so I apologize if it's a little bit bright. I hope you can still follow me okay. We're just going to do a reverse chain around the actual bow part of the ribbon. So now we can anchor that one down with a stitch, and we should have enough yarn left on our needle to start our back stitch. So I find it easier here to use my fabric marker and just mark out the little V points as to where I'm going to be stopping my back stitch for each section of the ribbon. This just helps keep me on track with my stitches. So for the back stitch, we're just going to bring our needle up, and we're just going to do small little stitches here and fill in the ribbon section. For this first part of the ribbon, it's just one straight line, but as we move down, you'll see that the ribbon actually has parts of it that are a little bit thicker than others. So we'll show you how we're going to do that one too. So now I've moved on to the second part of the ribbon, and this one's a little bit fuller, so I'm just going to do my back stitch slightly on the outer side of the markings on the stick and stitch, and we're going to do 2 back stitches, and then we've got a little bit more to the left of that we need to fill. So we're just going to pop another back stitch in there and go back up and fill in to make that a little bit thicker. You should probably put about 4 stitches into this section. Now we should have enough yarn on our needle to keep going on to the next part of the ribbon. But you'll see we're probably a little bit too far away. So what we're going to do is we're going to just whip back stitch our needle through our work. So that just brings our needle back down to our starting point where we want to carry on stitching. And again, we're just going to go in with the back stitch, and we're going to stay slightly to the right so that we can fill in the other side with the back stitch as well to give it a little bit more definition, a little bit more thickness. And this one requires just one more stitch into the center. And we can carry on like this all the way down until we get to the bottom of our ribbon. And for the final bit, it's just one tiny little straight stitch. Now to do a tie off here, we're just going to do a whip back stitch through our work, and then we can just snip away the ends. You can, if you want, add a little knot at the end. It's entirely up to you. But really, it shouldn't go anywhere. It's pretty tight. And we can repeat that process also for the top section as well. You can thread it back onto your needle and whip back stitch it through your work, or you can add a knot and just snip away the excess ends. Now you'll see on my design, I actually have 2 loops on my ribbon. This is not actually part of the pattern. I just added this on afterwards as I thought it needed 2 loops. If you want to add that, it's a case of just using your fabric marker and putting another loop at the top section. It's just another chain stitch, so this is optional. Now repeat this whole process this time for the other shoe and you are finished. What a beautiful, beautiful project. Now let's remove our stick and stitch. You can soak this in a bowl of lukewarm water. You might need to help it along a little bit, or you can run it under a shower pressure tap. This is another good way of getting it off. It can take 2 or 3 times to remove the stick and stitch. If all else fails, you can pop it in the washing machine on a very cold, delicate setting. Make sure your flat lay to dry, and once it's dry, you are good to go. So I really hope you loved making these beautiful ballet slippers. This is definitely one of my favorites. Happy, happy stitching, guys.